Hello, I'm Myles Sweeney, and I'd like to introduce you to a theory that I have created for development. It is called Unitary Developmental Theory, and we talk about its applications for change management and organization development. I want to start this by introducing you to the problems that give rise to my doing this, and very briefly experience these instances of failures across three domains in psychiatry, OD, and economics. So first of all, psychiatry briefly, I helped two people escape the psychiatric system, and through just terrible diagnoses. I mean, a conversation of 20 minutes to each of them convinced me they were fine. One of them had some medication for depression, but it was far better than being incarcerated and with tardive dyskinesia as they had at the time from major tranquilizers. The other case was an OD case. The consultant brought in self-directed teams into a culture that was characterized by bullying on the shop floor, embezzlement by management, that kind of stuff. And as you can imagine, whatever discipline had been there evaporated, and well, what went on just shut the place, and there was a regionally significant loss of jobs. The economics we needn't bother covering, but it left a really disorienting dilemma is the term. I was just fazed by this. This wasn't to happen in my world. And I had this fortunate, if you like, breadth of expertise. All of those things. I lectured nearly everything in psychology, to be honest, developmental, neurological, in fact, and so on. I even lectured management theory. I was way into systems theory. I studied economics in another life. I was very into history and culture, and above all here, working in good and bad organizations. And I used to put a thing to managers in training that if you worked in good and bad organizations, and you're not willing to make the difference, you shouldn't be in management. And I still hold to that. And this gives you the motivation to make things right in an organization. It certainly does for me anyway. So it began with a stroke on a page, and it was a line to differentiate organizations who could take on change from those who couldn't. And here we are with this publications through Rutledge on the left of our screen over here. The psychology, which relates to natural psychological maturation and recovery, and the volume 2 is related to organization development and change management. And the idea is that we're producing the organizational stuff first, but it won't be long, a matter of months until we get the people end of it going as well, and that is a unitary organization development option. But the challenge is, this anemic productivity rates, and I'm not giving any reference in this, the books are full of them, and if you come to, join us in any way, you can access loads of stuff with references and so on. But the productivity rates in recent times are described as anemic, and these high failure rates, and look, if you're skeptical about them, please read Burney's 2017 BURNES. Page X to XIV, 5 pages. They're pretty comprehensive on these failure rates. They are averaging 75%, 50% for M&As when measured against average sectoral returns in 3 years and those kind of things. They are pretty horrendous, these failure rates. So there's an obvious paradigmatic deficit which also is addressed by the theory. A proven premium for agility that is reached to any degree by only 20%. The premium is 30% minimum for your agility, and why are only 20% of organizations even reaching anything like it? Resilience is misunderstood as being tough when or steadfast and so on, when really it needs agility. Predominant culture, unfortunately, is linear, and the model really does expand our understanding of linear mindset and linear culture. And if you're coming up against this, it's a tough one, because linear does not want to change, as you can imagine. And as this leads to a total inability to address complexity, our VUCA environment and so on. And these terms, dynamic learning, autonomy, and regeneration, they're the three higher levels of the model which relate to differentiating levels of agility. But that's what you need for your 30% plus premium. So the solution was always to be learning. This was known across all these domains, but there was no model of developmental learning until now. And even there you see Learning Society, that's Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel economist, shows what it should look like, how it should function, what government should focus on. But he deferred how this was to be done to psychology. And of course, psychology doesn't have a model until now. And also we have this postmodern skepticism, and this is an important little thing. Why have we this skepticism of authority and the whole postmodern flatlining kind of a culture? It is because grand theory has failed and religion has failed. And the real problem is immaturity. These things that are out there and these areas are shown by the model to be immature, and we need to address the whole world system across these fault lines. So the validity of a developmental model for one level of socioeconomic demands validity for all levels. This arose about 2 years into my work on trying to do something for organizations. That was my applied speciality, and this was a premise that arose, and that's where we've ended up. So this is a brief look at a full system application of the model. This is our hierarchy, if you like, on the left, from crash up to leadership. These are the 7 levels of the model, and across the horizontal, then starting with physical resources in the third line down from the top, if you like, physical resources. This covers stuff like the constructs, if you want to call them that, or capabilities. These would include your physical building, your technology, and so on. Work is next, and that would take on board things like your job characteristics, theory, and so on. And we go along then in increasing integration to the outlier here, which is macroeconomics. And brief example of that would be how you engage with the legislative system and so on. So our hierarchy, to get back to here, and if we're doing the legal system, if you like, in one, these are user-friendly terms. These are not our definitive terms, which we'll introduce in a minute. But crash, you are actually breaking the law. Your organization is breaking the law if you're down here. Whereas in 7, in leadership, you're actually leading to good legislation that is ideally mutually beneficial, and so on. So we can have a look at these 7 levels very briefly. Crash, there is no internal momentum or growth for a number of reasons, which can be that you're actually draining resources in the organization, or you're in depressed or obsolete mode, and perhaps paralysis by analysis. These are 3 little divisions within that level. Critical then, this is where your kind of groupthink happens. Critical singularity, deferral to a critical customer, a critical product, critical leader, whatever it might be. But this is a critical stage insofar as you've only one step below to fall. If that customer goes, if you're sold, or whatever it might be, that's the ice you're walking on. Comfort then is your socio-emotive level. It is, in organization terms, it's a kind of a niche or a symbiotic relationship. Again, there is no real drive for agility or anything like that. Operational is your formal organization, your process, procedure, training, that kind of stuff. Competitive then is your learning from the customer. This is adaptive learning. This is customer care, that kind of stuff. Advantage then is your innovation and your autonomy. We have a differentiation there between people who are freed up to be self-expressive in an organization, engage in innovation, and then the autonomous structures like your self-directed teams. So quickly there, that guy was bringing in a level 6 function into a culture where the profile, which is these dots, the profile would be between 1 and 2. So the gap is unsurmountable and the thing will fail. And I have to point out straight away that like only 20% are in these 5, 6, and 7. So most organizations, 80% of our organizations are in levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, and the changes organizations want are all 5, 6, and 7. So it's an inevitable problem. Leadership then, you have in that you have your authentic leadership would be one part of it, and another part then would be this regenerative leadership. And the optimum agility is your regenerative ecosystem, and this means that you have the capacity within the organization to frictionlessly produce these autonomous structures that can spin off. What a motivation that is for your organization, and you create a network of these spin-off systems. So I want to stress that the customer need only see the 7-level model, but you'd ask what the hell took 7 years or 17 years to develop. And this is a brief look under the hood. This is the psychology end of things. People coming from a psychological background would like to see this, I'm sure, how it corresponds with other models and so on. It brings a lot of definition, completes things as usual. That's what it usually does. And you see all these things are in the same direction, in the same sequencing. There is just looking at things from a different perspective, that's all. And so cluster CAB, these are the clusters of personality disorders, and here they get a theoretical grounding rather than the basic statistical differentiation that they rely on yourselves. Also, similarly with organization development, the one that catches my eye is Tuckman and Jensen, which is pretty thorough by comparison. And you see the problem here is all these models are missing phases. And the previous issue I drew attention to was traction. That you're bringing in a level 6 tool where there's only a level 3. Well, there's no traction. Here we're talking about sustainability. If you're missing phases, there's no sustainability. But Tuckman and Jensen is not bad at all, and you see that adjourning or independence for your team development. And that literally means independence as I've described it in terms of the spin-off of the team into an enterprise of its own. Another quick graphic that you can look at, stop the presentation if you like and just have a look. Again, leadership is inspirational, but also the leader would also need to be bringing in this regenerative ecosystem, which applies to families as it does to organizations and as it does to economies, that you have these systems that reproduce of themselves independent offspring, independent thinking children, cluster development that produces companies and so on. So what's new in UDT? Well, here we are. It's this model across people, organizations, and economies. And we can do this because they're defined as micro, meso, and macro socioeconomic systems. So they're just levels of the same thing. And people have to be defined as socioeconomic systems. There's no isolation from the social or the economic system. So we have to be defined as that, even though some psychologists would prefer we were defined in a laboratory. So this is another important thing that is in the book, and the correlation between the maturity that's offered and returns resilience and agility for organizations and nations alike. Deep theoretical grounding, while other organization theories are criticized for the lack of it, mostly they're devised from experience, people's own experience and so on. It acts as a meta-theory for all schools of psychology. And it does this because it completes them and it grounds them and it disciplines them. Even your dialogue approaches, which are gaining in precedence nowadays, again, it's a kind of a postmodern thing. But that's what it does. That's exactly what it does to them. They're pretty much left to people's own devices. There's a kind of an agreed sort of a process with them. But their results are debated. They're not, success rates are not comparable to other kinds of approaches. In psychology, their success rate is getting back into the workplace after a year or something like that, whereas others is remission for a year. Very big difference. So culture is redefined. So this is a critical thing here. I mean, culture is the main intrinsic reason that's given for the failure of strategies, failure of change alike, and yet is as pathetically defined as the way we do things around here. And now we can clinically define it with clinical validity as habituated maturational stage. And this transforms the idea of culture change, and it shows the kind of futility that's in prevailing approaches, to be honest. Now, this is another huge differentiation, linear, lateral. We're all born linear or lateral, and we have expanded the definition of these things in the model. Different levels of lateral, different levels of linear. And these are fault lines in our world, fault lines in our politics. My God, it's so obvious, and we need to address this. And in organizations, we all have to grow beyond our linear or lateral programming, and that's done through maturation. And we become more integrative as we become more mature, and we can take on more complexity, which is what's missing if you're stuck with your real, basic linear or lateral programming. So, look, it answers loads of calls and it guides to high functionality. Other models in psychology are biased, and as in economics and evolution, change management, economic theory, and they're not able to operationalize systems theory. That's been a singular failure in their approaches, whereas UDT really does incorporate all the functions, autopoiesis, hysteresis, feedback, feed forward, all that kind of stuff. So clinical diagnosis with UDT gives a starting point along each capability. So remember what you saw there was a snapshot of what we call dynamics. Behind those dynamics then are 5 typically construct capabilities. So that's where the work is done. That's your working phase. You measure the capability along the maturity hierarchy, and that gives you your starting point. Now, it's not as totally simple as that, as we'll see, but it gives you traction, and your normative process optimizes sustainability. So this is it, the critical definition, the differentiation between the two divisions of the model. Now, not only is there no agility in the bottom half of our model here, there is no capacity to take on change, none of any change really sustainably at all. So there is a much more radical approach needed. If you were diagnosed in the higher half of the model, then there is the option for next step kind of stuff. But this is a big insight and shows why so many change fails. So the volume 2, the OD book, gives a lot of time to a case study on the company called Hire, which is going for a lot of attention as an exemplar of agile organization. And the point here is that everything that Hire does is plottable back to the model. The short story here is that unlike prevailing approaches, which are literally copycat kind of stuff, we can build intrinsic agility from any system. So it's not too difficult to apply this stuff. The most basic is you plonk the model down on the table and you explain to your CEO or whatever, this is where you think you are, well, this is where you actually are. And I've done this, and it's very graphic. I give you the case of Apple in the 80s, case in point. They would have characterized themselves as a level 6, but they had disconnected from the marketplace, so there was no level 5. They were not really as formalized as they should have been, so there is no level 4. So what is their maturity? Well, at best it's a level 3, and that's why they were passed out by organizations that had these levels. Change management process. For a discrete change management, you're bringing in a new tool into the organization. You go through the actual phases of the model, from your disorienting dilemma, to create that motivation that the old cannot survive and we need to change and so on, and a disconnect then from the old. You just go through the process, so it can be used as a discrete change management process also. Then you come to the OD frameworks like the one I showed you for the full system one, but there are also, we have developed one for team development, digital transformation, collaboration, and M&A integration. The latter is just a matter of profiling both organizations and comparing the gaps and building both. So, I mean, the M&A stuff, as I said, you have 50% failure rate for something that is actuarially judged to be a success. So this, this cultural thing is the issue. That is the people, the human, the organization as such. And so this should be a big help. Now, on our platform, which is on www, you see the email address at the bottom, workcmf.com. You can customize from the capabilities that are attending to these frameworks. You can customize to your own desires, to what are critical dynamics for yourselves, and proceed accordingly. Now, scheduled training, I just want to introduce that. I do hope people will engage with this and want to know more and come on board and be able to use the thing either as the basic discussion tool, your change management process, or to learn how to implement it in a full system process. Because the choice is very simple. Now, this is pretty stark stuff, but I don't want to pull any punches here because, I think the difference is quite real. Right, there are approaches that are out there. They have no theoretical basis. They lack discipline, operationalizability. And this idea there, look, the definition of culture, which is so critical, and it is absolutely transformed by the model. A lot of stuff is now DIY. People use their own experience to pull this and this into a process, or the latest fad, and we know plenty about fads in organization development. But here's the key thing. None of them have anything to do with learning. So how can they facilitate real change and development? And here's a finding of our research, my research process, if you like. Currently, to a large degree, success depends on the state of the patient. It's no accident that there are 20% only agile companies and really only 20 to 25% success rate for change. If you're not agile, if you're not in that top 3 level, you can't change. Very, very difficult. So, that's the truth of it. Currently, to a large degree, success depends on the state of the patient. Now, I could go on, if I could interrupt. I mean, look at what we have. We have catch-all terms like initial in developmental models to try and describe the problematic ends of behavior in the system. Well, that gives you no grounding. It's like you're a floating oil rig. You have no sense of getting in there in the problematic stuff which the model gives you. There is this bias in organizational science towards the higher end of the model, the optimistic, the positive. The corresponding bias, or the opposing bias then in psychology, is towards the problematic end. So you might get some sense of why I needed the breadth of expertise, if you like, to get this thing finished. Quality interventions where the people attention is the real reason for success. Developmental process based on CEO opinions. Now, please, that's like the vet going in asking a donkey what's wrong with them, rather than the vet going in with a model of how they should be. Biased assumptions such as what evolution looks like, a naive view of what's good for humans, copying what worked with one organization, that is absolutely ruinous. Extrapolating from increased sophistication of software development process to maturation of human system performance. I mean, that's pretty... What's that got to do with anything? Or you have simplistic five-phase fallacy processes, 5-phase fallacy. Everything is reducible to 5. This is just dumbing down things. That's not the way things are. So no wonder we have failures. And there's even 2-dimensional frameworks out there. Do you really think human nature is that simplistic? But given all that, and given my own sense of frustration, because why did I have to do all this? Why did it take me 17 years to do this? Now you're shocked. But why did it take that long? And it gives you this sense of frustration. But I have to stand back and say that, these people were operating without any help from psychology. There was no guiding model of learning, and they did their best shot. And the thing is, if you look at those corresponding tables, you will see that they are seeing exactly the same process as I have seen, except they're seeing it through a limited lens. That's all. So I take my hat off to these pioneers. I really do. It's the fact that things haven't progressed. That is the real pain, if you like. But hopefully this is a movement along the way to curing that pain. But the alternative then, this model, it makes sense. It's a model with unprecedented theoretical depth. That's from one of the reviewers. Useful, you know, the returns agility and resilience, operationalizable for diagnosed and prescribed normative development. So whatever you come out on the online stuff, the diagnosis, we get quantitative and qualitative data from questionnaires within the organization. And the qualitative data gives us the sense of hysteresis, whether we're going up or down with this. And that gives us also information that we know whether we go next step or radical and so on like that. Look, it's published through Routledge. It's the leading human sciences publisher. So this got the full review. It went through a university and it went through 3 or 4 different panels and the publisher themselves. So it's been thrashed to death, and you know, it's come out shining. And the volumes for societal development, which incorporates criminal justice system. One guy, he put it, he says, we're putting lives back on tracks that nobody knew existed, which is nice. You know, the educational environment, the 25% underachievement for all students for an average needs to be addressed, because we need to move from data driven to developmental and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so that meta theory, working model, these other points, working with a proven model of human nature rather than antagonizing that nature. Well, there you are. Because this process is actually how human socioeconomic systems learn developmentally. So we have a model of human nature as a learning system. Now we are working with human nature rather than antagonizing it, missing beats according to bias and so on. So we are dealing now with a normative, operationalizable, reviewed, useful, scientific process that is in. So given where we've come from, the thing is what to do. You've only a small awareness so far, but you should have a sense of what can be learned and enacted through UDT. And you can engage with a couple of training sessions. Just the first to see what it's like, I suppose. There is an ebook version of Volume 2 supplied as a basis, a text basis. But then there's also specialized coaching support for implementations. And finally, certification and license to use the online platform and become a member of a learning community. So we have a little button there to click to see what each session contains, the dates for each, and apply for inclusion. And we would love to have you on board. If you want to make that difference between the good and bad organizations, please join us. Thanks.